I appreciate very much all of you coming and joining the planting we just did. I will speak a little bit about Palas por Pistolas project and then move on into another 2 or 3 projects, depending on how we're doing on time. This project basically started, I think, like 2 years ago, or not more, perhaps more, like 3 years ago, out of an invitation by the Botanical Garden in Culiacan, which is a city in the west of Mexico, where there's like an open-air collection of contemporary art, and I was invited to do a project there. And instead of doing a kind of a sculpture in a rotunda or a kind of pavilion in this beautiful garden, I was interested in doing something that had some resonance with the situation that was taking place, and it still is a problem in the north of Mexico. There is nearly 2,000 weapons that are coming into our territory every day from the United States. There's around 7,000 sale points of weapons in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, etc., where everyone can buy assault weapons, high-power weapons, and the markup of these weapons south of the border is like 5-fold, 10-fold, 10 times more. And that has created a whole introduction of this kind of deadly agent into cities where this abundance of weapons have created a wave of crime. And obviously this project is just a grain of sand in the kind of effort that is needed to be done. However, what we did, I'm gonna first start to describe a little bit how the project took place. I don't know if by chance you know, are you familiar with Albert Bandura? Albert Bandura is a Canadian social scientist, and like recently they did a research on the most like kind of influential psychologists of all time. They made this selection based on the number of book quotations and references in bibliography, etc. So Albert Bandura ranks 4th after first is Sigmund Freud, then is Skinner, 3rd is Piaget, and 4th is Albert Bandura. Why I'm bringing Bandura up here being in Canada is because he was like somehow an influence in the development of this project. Because Albert Bandura did something which is known as modeling behavior, and a series of experiments where, for instance, he had like a bubble doll, like one of these kind of punching dolls that you hit. And kids were led to this kind of this room where the bubble doll is, and they hug the bubble doll. And then a different group of kids are shown a film where someone is hitting the bubble doll, and then when the kids are led into the room again, they hit the bubble doll, and they even come up with new ways to hurt the bubble doll. So basically, Bandura has created different theories of kind of how do we learn, how the social learning happens. And I'm interested in his thinking and writing because the phenomena of violence has to do a lot with how guns in media are something that to this day continues to be something sexy and something that we haven't developed a kind of cultural rejection against weapons. Video games may be the kind of area where this is least observed. Interested in his ideas, I also wanted to work like kind of reverse engineer this process, creating a campaign inviting people to give up their weapons, no? So what we did was a series of TV spots, almost using the language of a soap opera, you'll see. I didn't direct them, I only gave like some ideas, and the local TV did it. But basically the idea is to model a situation that we expected the citizens would have.
Le encontré a mi hijo una pistola escondida en su cuarto. Yo no quiero que mi hijo sea un asesino. Aquí vengo a donarla. Un arma en casa es un peligro. Dónala y colabora por un mejor
Basically,
Sinaloa.
the idea was to activate at the core of families certain mechanisms where
Consejo Estatal de Seguridad Pública de Sinaloa y la Cámara de la Industria de la Radio y la Televisión, Delegación Sinaloa.
you would understand that there were no questions asked to whoever was surrendering a weapon. No? We wanted to also have a very predominant role, like a kind of a role of woman at the core of the families. For instance, in this TV spot, you see a woman who says, well, you know, like, I don't want weapons around in my house. I'm gonna take them to the city hall.
A mi marido no le va a gustar nada, pero ya me harté de que nomás se toma unos tragos y le da por sacar la pistola delante de nuestros hijos. Aquí vengo, señor, a donar esta arma.
So all these TV spots are different situations where none of them, I mean, like all of them kind of show weapons in a context as, okay, well, this is like the rifle that we had or something. Never assuming that they could be associated with a crime of any case. So it was very successful. We collected like 1,527 guns and rifles and of different kinds. All the plastic and wood parts were removed beforehand. And what we did then was to take the parts to a foundry. With the metal that was collected from them, the next phase was to use that metal and make the shovels. I'm interested in this process because it worked out through two private companies, two art collectors. The first one was Agustin Coppel, who is the patron behind the Botanical Garden, and he has a chain of stores that sell electric appliances. So his contribution was not only helping the logistics by appointing someone to help with all the bureaucratic process of working with the army, etc., but also creating coupons or vouchers where people could get like a coupon in exchange for the weapon they were donating. The other corporate support was Trooper, which is a company that makes hardware, and they supported the process of turning that metal into the shovels like the one we used today. At this point, what I am hoping is that this campaign doesn't stop here. The goal is to replicate the campaign in other cities, to turn this into a nationwide campaign. This is not like a new idea. Obviously, it's in the context of many efforts many people have made in cities where they try to collect weapons, make them into something different. We really need to rethink the entire military sector in all our countries. There are certain interesting cases. For instance, Costa Rica is a country which, in the context of Central America, has been the most prosperous country. One of the factors for its success is that at some point they decided to abolish their army, almost like their military spending. And they have like a kind of police force, but they took the money they were investing in military and used it in education instead. In history, we have had like different reasons for go to war. There have been times like where these ideas have been traded and also combined with a religion. like the Crusades, or in 19th century wars were mainly colonial. In the 20th century, there was a strong element of ideology, like a kind of Cold War struggle between socialism or communism and capitalism. But the reason why wars are fought today, at least in the case of Mexico, is trade. It's a capitalist war disguised by other fake moral elements, but basically it's always are economic. What I'm trying to explain is, if we look at some of the wars that have been fought in the last 10 years, for instance, like Iraq and Afghanistan, they are not good businesses. The colonial obviously brought a lot of wealth into Europe. The British Empire was the biggest drug dealer in the world with the Opium Wars. No? They controlled it. There was a whole department that was managing drug trade in China. And that was bringing a lot of wealth into Europe. But if you look at the kind of wars that Iraq and Afghanistan today, I think that the money that was spent in these drugs, if you look at it from a capitalist perspective, doesn't bring real return on investment. And what I'm trying to reflect on is, if war is proving not to be such a good business anymore, war will always be business, but for the ones who produce weapons. But in the end, it's one of the reasons why there's like this kind of economical problems in the United States, at least, and some other countries too. That means that we, as a planet, we are ready always. I mean, like, if the military sector won't cease to exist, it means that we acknowledge that even if it's not a business anymore, if it's not good for bringing profits into a country, that countries will still continue to have a military sector. Basically, I think that the big shift that needs to be done in the military sector is that instead of using the armies as a way to manage conflict, they should be sectors to manage environmental crisis. No? There will be more and more tornadoes and hurricanes and storms and environmental disasters with more frequency. So the whole military sector should change vocation and manage environmental crisis. That would have some positive opportunities. One would be that countries could compete for contracts, global contracts, so they could put their military sector to compete for contracts to do certain operations of rescue and bid on these kind of efforts. And obviously, it would have like a better charisma, even for imperialistic purposes such as opening markets. If you were doing these interventions not on a kind of a military basis with that kind of ideological that no one buys anymore. I mean, like, after everybody has become aware that the reasons to go for war in Iraq were based in a lie, that there were no such weapons of mass destruction, etc. People have learned that most of the kind of military interventions are not legitimate anymore. So I think that the Palas por Pistolas is like just like a kind of a grain of sand in a kind of what should be, or what I'm interested is in what could be other ways, where are other people thinking, in how do we rethink the military sector in society. I believe that first is not that military sector should be necessarily reduced. It's more like, okay, it's great that there's like such a hierarchical and disciplinary sector that can be channeled and sent into missions with such structure. The problem is that instead of using weapons for killing, they could be using tools for fixing the environment. The other thing is that I do believe that we need to develop a cultural rejection against the weapon production industry. The weapon production industry, both of small weapons and large weapons, is something which is never questioned. You can look at in the stock market, and all these companies are doing really well. They're public. You can invest on them. And the companies that produce guns, assault weapons, and all these machines for death are aware that probably half of their production is going to go into the black market. They have very shady interests in causing conflicts around the world to boost their sales. And this is never questioned. And I think that there is nothing most harmful in whatever can be like a human activity than producing weapons. That's my belief. If someone thinks different, I would like to hear the counterpoint, because I'm interested in learning this counterpoint. Some people say gun availability makes communities safer. It may be in some countries, but I doubt that's true. At least in Mexico, I know for sure that's not true. The more weapons that you have, the least secure that a country is, because it's like a very fragile. If you don't have like extremely sound judicial system, like the introduction of weapons can very easily make a whole city or community crazy. I think I have went a long way in this topic, so I'm gonna stop there. I apologize for letting my mind talk out loud, and I'm gonna move into a different project. I'm gonna show you two projects that took place this year. This project is called Sanatorium. It is based in a forgotten word that was called society. It was a term used briefly in the 30s and 40s as the art and science of healing society. It was like a kind of a applied effort of social psychology. Often social psychology remains in the field of diagnosis, but not so much into kind of a therapy. So what was Sanatorium? Sanatorium was an exhibition organized by the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, but it was not in the Frank Lloyd Wright building. It's part of a project called Still Spotting, where 5 artists were invited to do 5 projects in the 5 boroughs of New York. I was opening the series with Brooklyn, and what we did was to take former hardware shop, very large space, 2 floors, and the only way to experience the show was to check in as a patient. You had to spend at least 2 hours, and you would arrive, pay your ticket. It was $16, same as the kind of museum ticket. And then you were greeted by a nurse. You had to sign a paper, a release form. And this release was, like I stated, that none of our staff is real doctors. This is not real therapy. This is an art project. Despite of that, everything looked like if you were in a hospital, no? The walls, the environment. And the nurse would ask you, well, how are you? Do you have any ailments or problems? And depending on what you were referred to 4 of 16 different therapies. You had like these different sessions. Most of them were 2 or 3 individual therapies and then at least 1 large therapy. And you had these 16 short treatments that lasted about between 20 and 30 minutes. I'm gonna explain some of them. This is the Museum of Hypothetical Lifetimes. And what is it? What it is like a architecture model, as you see, where you have a set of spaces that represent different moments of your life. Number 1, which is like the beginning, is the cradle. There were shelves with tiny objects, like little toys or tokens, and you were asked to place in this model. Therapists will tell you, choose an object that represents your mother, or choose an object that represents your earliest, like your oldest memory. And it was basically similar to when a curator uses a model to plan an exhibition. Here you had this model as a way to see your whole life. You had this map where in 20 minutes, you saw your entire life, both the past and the future, in a single space. And you had to then, you were choosing these objects, placing them. For instance, number 9 is the years you spend in education. You have like these different square rooms that represent like classrooms where the responsibility and the knowledge is growing while the play space is shrinking. There's the kind of ripple, like irregular space, which is the time that you spend with bad companies and discovering yourself and rock and roll and all that. Then 11 is like all these square cubicles are your work life, where you have like these different works, and some that are closed, maybe, for instance, a job you never took, some that are like a spiral, maybe is one that it took you some time to find. Here, which is the development of your personal life in the rest of your life, those unclosed circles, maybe relationships somehow ended. It is obviously quite subjective how you plan this, but basically it's a space where you arrange images from your life, both present and past, and then once you have this exhibition, you explain the therapist and you guide this person through your life. So it's an exercise to see your whole life in few minutes. There's this other one called the Vaccine Against Violence. This is a cathartic exercise which combines some techniques from Primal Scream and a lot of other schools, where you're asked to take a balloon. And in this balloon, you have to draw the face of the person who has hurt you most in your life. And then you place the balloon on top of this dummy, and you are encouraged to hit the dummy and to tell the dummy why this person, why he hurt you so much, and why you hate them, and why you wish them whatever you want, you get even with them. And you end this process by breaking the balloon, meaning that if you kill one person in a symbolic act, you don't need to go in real life and kill that person. The kill is quite extreme, but break their balls or whatever. Once you do this ritual and you hit the dummy, you're given a placebo, a pill, which is a candy, and then you're told that you're vaccinated against violence. So you had that kind of release. These and other therapies on the sanatorium are basically, the whole project is in itself a delivery system of placebos. There's a lot of talk today about the power of placebos. If you're in a hospital and someone comes to see you without a lab coat, without a stethoscope, it's not the same as if they are wearing their costume. There's been all these studies that show you that if your doctor is overweight and tells you to lose weight, you just don't pay any attention. Or if they tell you not to smoke and they smoke, it's the same. There's no follow-up of that order. But more interestingly than the power of placebos are another term called, which is nocebo. The nocebo is something that is the opposite of the placebo. For instance, someone is suffering pain, and in some experiments, they said, we're going to inject you a medicine we need you to have, but it's going to make your pain worse. And what they were injected, in fact, was morphine, which was easing their, chemically, they should ease their pain. But they were injected, and they were said that their pain would be worse, so they started to feel more pain, even if they were injected morphine. So all these experiments about placebos are the idea of the sanatorium is that in itself is a delivery system of placebos. So it is important that the moment that you sign up as a patient, you are told that you're gonna live a lie. And being a lie and being warned doesn't stop you from buying it. Another therapy is called CT-LICS. This is a secular version of the ritual of confession. What you are told is, okay, you write in a piece of paper something that a secret that you're really embarrassed, something that you would never tell, you're really ashamed of, and then what you do is that you put this message in a bottle and in a bucket, and then in exchange you can take someone else's bottle and read someone else's secret. There's like some incentive. Few things are more pleasurable than gossip, no? But this is like innocuous gossip, because you're asked people the therapist asks you to refrain from using personal names or anything that may harm you or someone else. So you both have that kind of the same liberation that you have in the ritual of confession, but also enjoyment that you have in gossip, and both are somehow harmless. This other therapy is called voodoo, and it's the positive version of the voodoo doll. Well, in the voodoo, you had like this table with a bunch of cloth generic dolls. There were a number of small objects that had different meanings. You were not told what the meanings were, but obviously you assigned them some meaning. And then you had to choose 5 objects, and you had to choose where in the body to place them. Basically, when you were asked to think on a person, it could be you, it could be someone else, someone you know, and someone it had to be someone you wish to do good to. I'm going to show you a little video of a testimonial that it will show you a little bit one of these cases.
For the voodoo doll, a woman came, and the way that I've been doing it is I've asked people if they want to talk about who the doll is for, who it symbolizes, and what the charms symbolize while they're doing it, or wait till after they're done. And she decided to wait till after she was done, so she's putting together the doll. And then she finishes and she goes, okay, this doll is for my mother. And I'm kind of going, oh, okay, it's for your mom. Then she says, it's for my birth mother, who I've never met and who I don't know. I don't know where she is. I don't even know if she's still alive. And so that changes everything in my mind, but I'm just listening to what she's saying. And so she goes on and starts describing the different charms. So the first charm she describes is the Madonna medallion that she puts on the womb as a symbol of motherhood and giving birth. The second charm that she points out is the key that she puts on her hand, because the daughter who's making the doll is starting the process of trying to find her birth mother. And actually her birth mother has to also be willing to be found. So she feels that her mother has the key to reuniting the mother and daughter. Then she points to the, put the dove, because at the heart, because she hopes that her mother is at peace with the decision that she made of giving up her daughter for adoption. And then the wheat stalk she put on the arm, the symbol of home, even though she doesn't feel like she has home, that is a symbol of home, that she carries it with her. She put the skeleton as a necklace, as like a charm, because she said she's read that parents who give up child for adoption feel like the child dies, or that they lose, there's a death of their parenthood, of being a parent. And then the last thing she pointed out was the mirror, because she said the only reflection she has of her mother is her own face, and that she may actually resemble her mother, and what might be resemblance of her mother's face. And so as she's describing this, I actually start crying, because I'm estranged from my mother. I feel like I lost my mother, and that my mother gave me up because she was very physically and emotionally abusive to me. And so I'm feeling very connected to this doll, because it's something that I wouldn't do. I would not have made my mother a doll. But I'm realizing now that this doll is kind of partly mine. So as we're finished the conversation, the client gets up and leaves the doll at the table. And I said, oh no, this is your doll. Everyone's taking their dolls. And she goes, I don't think I want the doll. And so I said, well, I said, you know what? Why don't you just leave it here, and if you change your mind, you can come back and get it. So she goes throughout and does the other therapies, and I'm kind of watching at the corner of my eye. And I also write down what the doll symbol is, in case the doll gets left and no one knows what the doll is. I was going to pin it and attach it to the doll if it got left. But as the time goes by, I'm realizing that I don't want her to come back for the doll, because I'm realizing that it's kind of the doll that I should be making for my mother. And I feel like this woman made the doll for me and for my mom, and for her mom, because in some ways we both lost our mother, but she was actually brave enough to make this doll. And so in leaving it, she left it for me because it's something that I needed. I'm gonna start crying again. So anyway, she didn't come back for the doll, and now I have it, and it's something that is good for me to have, I think, because it's the first time since I was abused as a child that I've ever thought really truly of giving something positive back to my mom. I usually think of her in either neutral or negative, so this is, I think, part of my own healing, so it's good.
Beautiful.
And I start crying.
That's so good. Great. Fantastic story. There were all these kind of plethora of insights all the time, which are very exotic. I don't even know the term, if it's like a kind of counter-transference or whatever it would be like, the psychological term. Now the Gudu has been taken to India, and now this is an orphanage in India where they're doing the Gudu dolls. And they came up with new technique where they paint the Gudu because they didn't have the charm, so they used colors assigned like to different kind of feelings, and they cover it with plastic to keep the magic in. So I got this. One of the therapists that was taking part of the project in New York went to India and started doing it there. I'm gonna show you some few others. Ontological algebra, you come and you tell your problem to someone who has like mathematical skills, and they turn it into like an equation. And you have like a graph. It's like this kind of a therapy where you work in a kind of whiteboard, and your problem is charted or explained as a formula. You can do an inversion to the formula to see your problem in a different way. The compatibility test for couples. The compatibility test for couples, you have a series of different fruits and vegetables of different kinds, and two persons are asked to choose the fruit that they identify most with, and then you make a kind of blend. They put them in a blender, and you can make a kind of juice or smoothie, and then you taste by the flavor how compatible you are as a couple. Yeah. The philosophical casino. The philosophical casino, it's an oracle. You come with a question. You are actually given the chance to make 3 questions. And there's these dreidels or dices that have different schools of thought. Some are Greek philosophers, others are German philosophers, Renaissance philosophers, etc. We were putting all the questions in the wall. The therapist takes your question, and then you are asked to choose which school of thought you want your answer from. And you spin these huge dreidels, they fall, and you get a quote from one of these thinkers, and you try to get some meaning out of it. This works very well when you have small groups of people. Let's say that four clients are joining the oracle. So let's say that you take turns to ask questions, and you have other guests who are observing, but if you don't see at first what the phrase may mean, they suggest something, or they share their own experience. And this kind of small group therapy, it's very useful to make decisions, also very enjoyable. The Transmigration Express. The Transmigration Express, it was a group therapy where you had like this kind of balloons. It's based on past life regressions therapy. some breathing exercises that mix Kundalini yoga. You had like a kind of hyperventilation. You have a guided meditation that leads you to a place in the past, and then you visit yourself in the past, and then you come up, and everybody shares the vision of where they went with their imagination. I'm just showing you some of the 16 different therapies. Maybe I have time to show one or two more projects. The Urban Genome Project. The Urban Genome Project is a research archive based on interviews, thinking on the metaphor of the Human Genome Project or any genome project where you have a map of how life is built. When we look at cities, we look at hardware, no? like physical buildings and roads, etc. But there was a set of processes in order for that to exist that had to do with public administration, with financing, with planning, with public and private developments. So when you're making a genetic map, you have the prospecting, which is taking the samples, and then the sequencing, which is mapping, and then recombination, which is like taking one chromosome or one gene out of this jellyfish and mixing it with this tomato so it won't rot. So it's a little bit like how to make transgenic cities. So there was in Mexico this summit of 2,000 mayors from all over the world that were coming. And the summit took place in different cities. So I built this moving platform that was moving to different venues, and a group of 38 interviewers collected 500 interviews from delegates of cities around the world. The idea was to make the interview with a specific format where you had like a kind of a spreadsheet and you had 50 topics, which like ranged from waste management to employment or air quality of air or water access, connectivity, commuting, mobility, etc. The idea was to have a good system of tags, because if you ask kind of a mayor or someone or a delegate from a city how to make a better city, you're going to get a very generic answer. No, well, they should be more environmental, more efficient, and more participatory or something. That kind of questions are not really helpful. What is really helpful is to go into the chromosome and then into the gene of how one particular decision was made into a real thing. So the questions were choose only, out of these 50 topics, choose only 5 that you are most proud of, that you have, or that were your biggest achievements. And in this way, the interview, which lasted about 10 minutes, in 5 segments of 2 minutes each, were these delegates answering, like telling about these 5 things. So when we were doing the interviews, we had this kind of spreadsheet, and then we were going 2 minutes over each point. We are building a database where we're going to put online these tags, and these tags you click on bicycles, and then you have 16 delegates from different cities saying how this particular tactic was implemented in the city. So when you go into very close detail of one topic, what is interesting is to see what are the little differences of the different strategies, and that the hope is that it's going to become a useful resource, and the idea is that the mobile unit may crash other summits and collect more information. So not only public sector, the idea is also to do it with private sector, social sector, and creative sector, no? Which is, someone would be like the private sector, obviously developers, etc. Social sector, we're working directly from citizen groups, and the creative sector, which includes architects, filmmakers, urbanists, artists, etc. I'm going to show you another project, which is Baby Mark. This is a project that is now in display at the Carpenter Centre in Minneapolis. It's a puppet show. It's a project I started doing in Japan in 2008, before the crisis. And the two main protagonists are Karl Marx and Adam Smith. And I was interested in go to the original sources and have these two figures come to a hypothetical debate and discuss. So I needed some kind of excuse or plot line. So the story takes place, started in a library. They bring in a microwave, but it's a different microwave. It's called Smartowave. And the Smartowave is basically a new microwave that you just put the ingredients in, and it cooks for you. And there are some kids that spend their evenings in the library, and then they're lazy, and they say, well, maybe if we put our homework inside the Smartowave, it's going to solve it. And they do, and actually it comes out solved. So they say, let's find a way to make money. And they go into the books, and they are, by mistake, instead of taking a business book, they take the Capital, the book from Marx, and thinking that capital means money and it's going to come turn into gold or something. But what they get instead is Karl Marx. And Marx starts to preach them about class warfare and revolution, and they're not interested. They still want the money. So Marx said, well, if you want money, why don't you bring Adam Smith? So they bring Adam Smith, and then Marx and Smith start to fight, and they go on fighting for different, in every episode they have always an argument. I could show you. This is studies for the puppets. I like it working in Japan in the development of the characters, because crafts, especially traditional toys, have interesting connection to modern art. Because, for instance, like working in the lathe, like the wheel, like when you like these kind of traditional toys, it's very close to some shapes that you often find, for instance, in the costume design of the Bauhaus, where you have like these kind of very abstract shapes. So what I was doing is like, okay, I'm gonna try to take these historical figures and make the most simple abstract design I could do. So I started doing these silhouette abstractions of these historical figures. This is Friedrich Engels, for instance. This is the librarian, Lenin, Mao Zedong, Adam Smith. So I'm going to show you one clip that was shot recently in Minneapolis, and probably will end there.
Genius. Yeah, this is okay, I guess. Warhol, the master. The art stuff is a little difficult for you, old chap, I do understand, but I do think you'll like this one quite a lot. It was produced in a factory.
It is a product. And you know how much surplus value is in this thing?
So much
So they make it in the factory. Nobody buys this because, oh, look at how much work it took. Oh, yeah. Why would you think I would like this? It's like, this is capitalism-fueled capitalism. Nobody even thinks about the fact that there was factory workers. They just go, oh, Andy Warhol, some guy. You know, he takes all those pictures like Coca-Cola, which I hate, and then he turns it into a painting and makes millions and billions of dollars on it. And it makes
Now, I think you've got the point. Andy Warhol, he was minting his own money. And how was he doing it? Strictly on the basis of originality and creativity. It is precisely your sort of thing,
No, he's
Marx.
doing it, he's completely exploiting the idea of creativity.
Well, just because he made money on it doesn't mean that it doesn't express the absolute right of the worker's authenticity deep within the structure of the various silk screening and factory labor processes by which it was created. You know, Marx, Marx, let's just agree on one thing. We're both after societal good, are we not?
Yeah, I guess.
And we both want the human condition to advance, do we not?
Yeah, sure.
Well, then if you agree on these two principles, then obviously this artwork is really genius.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be $33 million to be genius.
It could be 34.
I would rather it was worth, like, I don't know. Have you ever heard of Facebook?
What's that?
Does this have anything to do with Facebook? You know, it's got faces. You could, I don't know, put it in a book.
Well, I don't know, Marx. That's not the kind of literature I tend to read. You know, Marx, all of this pretending to be the proletariat is really getting tiresome.
You know what's tiresome? There's painting.
Yes, indeed.
Hey, you scooch away from me. Don't you scooch away. Oh. Yeah, you go and scooch. You scooch right out that door.
Scooch if I like to.
Well, that was it. Yeah, let's leave it there.